Welcome to part 3 of my reflections on the EU referendum. My name's Nigel Marriott and I'm an independent statistical consultant based in Bath, United Kingdom, and I work with a wide variety of clients around the world. I'm hoping you've already seen part 1 and 2 of my referendum series. So in part 1 I looked at where and how did Leave win, and part 2 I went into more detail as to why Leave won. In this part, I'm going to concentrate on the implications of the Leave vote for the next general election, whenever that happens to be. As of today, in November 2016, there is a lot of talk that there may be a general election next year, but who knows when it will be. Having said that, there's a lot of data now where we can start drawing some conclusions. And in part 4, I'm going to look at personal reflections on what the Brexit vote means. Let's start with a reminder of what the results were. So, as you should know by now, 52% of the population, equating to 17.4 million voters, voted Leave versus 48% for Remain. And in part 2, you would have seen me describe a model to estimate what the Leave vote was in each of the 650 parliamentary constituencies. The results for the referendum weren't declared by constituency, they were declared by counting areas, which were actually local authorities. So with 380 local authorities across the United Kingdom and 650 seats, you can see that the two don't match up. So I built a model which I explained in part 2, and in that the presentation, or rather with that model, I've worked out that 403 seats voted Leave versus 247 for Remain. If you've seen an earlier version of part 2, you might have seen slightly different figures with 397 seats for Leave and 253 for Remain. Since that early version, I've updated my model, and I'm now much more comfortable with this set here. This model actually was originally inspired by this guy, Chris Hanratty, for University of East Anglia, and he's updated his model as well. His model is based on the census of 2011, whereas my model is based on the general election results of 2015. But we're fairly close, actually, because he now estimates 408 seats voted Leave versus my 403. So I think with two different people coming up with quite different methods, I think we can generally now conclude that just over 400 seats voted Leave. And in this table you can see the breakdown of the seats and numbers voting Leave. A reminder that for the most part throughout the presentation, I split England into two. I split London out separately from the rest of England, and that's because the results were very different in London, as you can see here, and demographically it is also very different from the rest of England. So it seems sensible to me to split London off from England. As we know, Wales and England outside of London voted Leave, but London, Scotland and Northern Ireland all voted Remain, and my model said that in Scotland every single seat actually voted for Remain. We can now see these results on maps here. So here we have the general election of 2015, and here we have my model superimposed on those seats with the Leave vote for each seat. So blues represent seats where overall the voters voted Leave, and the sort of orange and red seats are seats where voters voted Remain. So as I said earlier, in Scotland no seats voted for Leave, but when we get down into England and Wales we can see a lot of blue. And the areas that particularly highlighted being the strongest Leave, you can see this whole area of the Fenland area moving up into Humberside, over to the Nottinghamshire and South Yorkshire coalfield, or the ex-coalfield, and then up here on the east coast of the northeast, quite a few Leave areas there. And then another area here in the Thames Gateway reaching into East London, some very strong Leave votes around there. But when we get into the home counties and into central London, we see some Remain votes coming in, particularly in the central London. And this was fairly typical. The city centre actually had the strongest Remain vote. Wales overall voted Leave, but you can see some patches here where they actually voted Remain. And these are the nationalist seats. And indeed, one of the things that's quite clear from this analysis is that all the nationalist seats in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland voted Remain. And I think that's quite telling about the politics of the nationalist party, that for them it was actually probably no bad thing that Britain voted Leave overall, because they can then play the card, well, we voted Remain, but England voted Leave, so therefore we'll be better off independent. The numbers down here are the number of seats for each party, so I'm hoping you recognise the blue is Conservative, red Labour, orange Lib Dems, etc. Over here we have the number of those seats that actually voted Leave, so we can see 242 of the 331 Conservative seats voted Leave. Northern Ireland's not shown on these maps just for space, but there's 18 seats in Northern Ireland, 7 of which voted Leave, and as I said, every single nationalist seat in Northern Ireland did actually vote Remain. Now, from now on, for the rest of this presentation, I'm not going to pay much attention at all to Scotland and Northern Ireland. The reason for that is that really it was apparent before the referendum, never mind the referendum result, but the politics of those two countries are quite different now. Northern Ireland have always been different for a few decades, given the unionist nationalist debate there. But Scotland, to my mind, in 2015 showed that it was now a country split along unionist and nationalist lines. And for my mind, the politics of Scotland in the next general election will be much more dominated by that aspect rather than the Brexit aspect. So I'm not going to pay too much attention to Scotland, and I haven't actually attempted to make any forecast what might happen to the next election in Scotland. So going forward now, I'm going to largely concentrate on England and Wales. Let's first of all list the seats that were strongest for Remain and Leave. So here we have the top 30 seats in terms of the Remain vote. The seat with the biggest Remain vote, 79.3%, was Islington North, which is Jeremy Corbyn's seat, the Labour leader. I find that quite amusing in a way, because a lot of Labour MPs and members were blaming Jeremy Corbyn for the referendum defeat, saying he hadn't bothered to campaign hard enough, and he may have even voted Leave, according to some people. But it appears that his constituency was the biggest Remain seat of all. When you go through the list of the top 30, you can see that the majority of seats are either Labour seats or nationalist seats. So we have quite a few Scottish nationalist seats, plus a couple here in Northern Ireland, Foyle with the SDLP and Belfast West with Sinn Féin. There's a few Conservative seats, all in London, as you can see here, including Richmond Park, which is going to be the subject for a by-election in December. And I'm going to cover that in a later presentation. Then on the Leave side, we see that Boston and Skegness comes out as the biggest Leave vote. And in many ways that doesn't surprise me, because in the EU election of 2014, Boston and Skegness was the only area, or strictly speaking Boston Council, not Boston Skegness seat, the Boston Council was the only council in the whole of the United Kingdom where UKIP got more than 50% of the vote. So I'm not too surprised that that should be the biggest Leave voting area. As you can see, it's a Conservative seat. But when you look at the top 30 seats here for Leave, you can see the vast majority of them are actually Labour seats. And of course, this brings up the problem for Labour. both on the Remain side and on the Leave side, the biggest Leave seats and the biggest Remain seats tend to be Labour. And that dichotomy really creates a problem for the Labour Party in that it appears that their voters, or their seats at the very least, are either extreme. The Conservative Party, by contrast, don't seem to be at extreme. They've got a few seats here that you can see that are strongly Leave, and the majority of those seats are strongly Leave, but they don't seem to have quite the same extreme. And this is something that's going to have quite an implication when we look at the next chart, which is shown here. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on this chart because, to my mind, these two charts pretty much capture the entire picture as it comes to the next general election. What does Brexit mean for the political parties in the United Kingdom? What I've done is I'm concentrating here on England and Wales, and that includes London, though we don't have Scotland and Northern Ireland. There are 573 seats in total in those nations. And what I've done is split those seats into deciles. So I've sorted the seat, first of all, by the percentage voting Leave, and then the bottom 10% in terms of the Leave vote, i.e. the strongest Remain vote, become one decile, and these are these points here. Then the next 10% become this decile, and so on until we get to the top 10% in terms of the Leave vote, becoming the top decile. And then within each decile, so you've got about 57 seats. I've then calculated the average vote share in 2015 general election for the major parties here. So the coloured, I'm hoping, will be obvious. So the blue diamond are the Conservative, the red squared Labour, the purple triangle, the UKIP, and then we've got the golden circle for Lib Dems and green square for the Green Party. Now, because the Lib Dems lost a lot of votes in 2015, I thought it was worth repeating the same analysis, but this time for the 2010 general election, just to see if the pattern of the vote changed when you have an election when UKIP was pretty small in its vote versus an election when UKIP got a lot of votes. In the 2010 chart, the white diamond is the British National Party, the BNP. They pretty much collapsed by the time we got 2015, and most voters would have shifted to UKIP instead. So that's the first couple of charts here. It's looking at the correlation between the vote share for each party and the Leave vote. And well, I'll come back to that because, no, I'm going to go on and look at these. What are the charts telling us? Well, first of all, let's look at UKIP here. The UKIP vote share increases as the Leave vote share and goes up. Conversely, as the Leave vote share goes up, the Green Party vote goes down. That shouldn't be too surprising at all, because if you remember from part 2, my model for predicting the Leave vote was based on something I called the Green Kipper Index. Green Kipper, which is the UKIP vote share minus the Green vote share. There were a couple of other variables as well, but essentially that was the basis of my model. So it shouldn't be too surprising if that what we see here. But the other parties is where it gets fascinating. Let's start with the Conservative and Labour Party, because they are mirror images here. You can see overall there's very little correlation between the Leave vote and voting Labour and Conservative. But there's no question in my mind that the Conservatives are beautifully placed to take advantage of the referendum, where Labour really have an identity crisis. As we saw in the previous slide, we saw that at the extreme, the biggest Remain and biggest Leave seats tended to be Labour, and sure enough, when we look at the bottom decile in terms of Leave vote, i.e. the most Remain seats, you can see Labour here got over 45% of the vote. As the Leave vote goes up, the Labour vote dropped down to nearly 25%. So there's like a 20% difference between the most Remain seats and the middle of the road seat. And then the Labour votes start to go up as you get into the most Leave seats. So when we get into the top decile, Labour is the biggest party, closely followed by the Conservatives, and then followed by UKIP. So in effect, when you get into this top decile of Leave seats, you have a three-way fight between Labour, Conservatives and UKIP. But when you get into the Remain seats, Labour is well ahead, Conservatives have a presence, but they're also the seat where the Lib Dems and the Green Party do best. So they tend to be quite sort of left-wing, I suppose, in terms of the voters. But there's a bit of a choice for the voters. There's Green voters, Lib Dem party, as well as the Labour Party. The main thing we can take out of those at the bottom decile here is that the UKIP vote is pretty small, and we don't have to worry about it. And indeed, if we look back in 2010, there was a similar pattern, except that, of course, the Lib Dems were very strong back then, and it was this decile that the Lib Dems did best in. You can see overall, though, that the Lib Dem vote is correlated with the Leave vote, but it seems to tail off once you get into the most Remain seats. So by the time we get into the bottom deciles here, the Lib Dem vote isn't really changing much, but the Labour vote and the Green vote is going up. So this tells me that the Lib Dems can rebuild themselves by targeting the Remain voters, but those Remain voters are also voting Labour and Green as well. So it's not going to be an easy task for them to get those voters back. The Conservatives, on the other hand, you can see a mirror image of Labour here. And in effect, if I were the Conservative Party, I would be focusing on the middle 80% of the seats here, where you can see the Conservative vote on average is already 40% plus. And in effect put across a message that said, you know, we're going to respect the referendum result, we're going to implement Brexit, but provided they don't go shooting off to extreme, they should be able to increase their vote share, I think, in the deciles here. Labour, on the other hand, has got to figure out which end does it want to appeal to. Does it want to appeal to the most Remain end, or does it want to appeal to the most Leave end? And obviously this is going to be something they're going to have to figure out. Now, as I say, I find those two charts fascinating, but in some way these two charts here over on the right are even more fascinating, because this time we've done the same thing. We split the 573 seats in England and Wales into deciles, but instead of using the Leave vote, I've used a different demographic indicator, which is the percentage of households without a car. Now, why did I choose that? Well, when I was analysing the general election results last year in 2015, I was doing this kind of analysis, and I was going through all sorts of demographic indicators that you had. You can think of obvious ones like income, health, education, ethnicity, age, etc. And all of these had an impact on the voting, particularly for Labour and Conservative. But of all the indicators that I could have chosen, this indicator is the biggest differentiator between Labour and Conservative voters. So basically, when you look at this, in the bottom decile, i.e. the decile most likely to have a car, only 15% of people voted Labour. But in the top decile, where 50% of households don't have a car, 55% of people voted Labour. So there's a 40% difference between the bottom and top decile. Conversely, for the Conservative, it goes the other way. It goes from nearly 60% to nearly 20%. So it's quite a dramatic difference between the two parties, which is why I really liked it. And when you stop and think about it, this indicator is actually a proxy for other demographic variables that we think are correlated with Labour and Conservative. Stop and think about it. Who is least likely to own a car? Well, obviously the young, either they haven't passed their test or they can't afford one. The poor, again, they can't really afford one. Or those that live in city centres who don't really need one because they've got public transport. So when you put those demographics together, the young, poor and city dwellers, you're effectively appealing to demographics that are known to vote Labour. Whereas when you go to the opposite, the older, richer and rural dwellers, you're starting to appeal to the conservative demographic. So it's a fascinating factor to use. But what's really interesting is that when you add the Leave vote, now these black lines here are the Leave vote in the deciles when we split by a number of households without a car. And I was quite astonished to see this, that in the bottom 9 deciles, there really isn't very much different between these. Even though some are very Labour, some are very Conservative, it's almost no different in the Leave vote. It's on average about 55%. It's only when you get into the top decile here, the decile that where at least 50% of the population doesn't have a car, that the Leave vote drop off. And as you say, it comes down to under 40%. So in many respects, that demographic there that's captured by the top decile bears a lot of quite a relation or similarity here with this demographic here, which was the most Remain demographic in the whole referendum. So this I found really interesting. Again, if you look at UKIP here, you can't actually see much difference in the UKIP vote. They're averaging about 15%. Only in this decile here do we find that UKIP drops off. Conversely, though, it's quite a strong demographic for the Green Party. So here, and the Lib Dems, however, they're pretty flat until you start getting into more rural areas, and then they start to improve. So in effect, where do the Lib Dems go from here? Well, in terms of their vote share, it's in semi-rural or rural areas, i.e. areas where people are quite likely to have a car, but also areas where people tended to vote Remain. Now, as we'll see, that's not very helpful for the Lib Dem, but I'll save that till later. If you're the Green Party, on the other hand, there's no question you need to be targeting the city centres, where they tend to be quite strongly Remain, tend to be a lot of young people there, not many people with a car. That's clearly where to go. UKIP, on the other hand, need to target the Leave area, but there's not city centres. It'd be small towns and places like that. Labour, on the other hand, well, I don't know what they do here. It's a repeat of what we see here, because these areas here in the top decile include areas where we've got poor voters. It's not just young students living in cities. It also includes poor voters where Labour does very well. And yet they also need to appeal to that other demographic who would, from all the evidence, appear to be strong Remain voters. So, as I say, if you take these two together, you'll build up a picture of what the opportunities and risks are for each of the political parties. What I'm going to do now is to concentrate in a bit more detail on two parties. First of all, UKIP in this slide, and then the Lib Dems in the next slide. So, if you're UKIP, and taking into account the information I've shown you in the slide so far, where do you go from here? Well, I've gone through all the seats in England and Wales. I've ignored Scotland and Northern Ireland, as I said. And I've tried to identify the top 100 targets, and these are shown here on this map. So the blue seats are Conservative seats at the present. The red-orange seats are Labour seats at the present. There's, of course, the one UKIP seat here in Clacton. And then I've gone further and split the seats into what I would consider medium priority seats and high priority seats. There are 25 seats in all that I would consider should be the top target for UKIP, and they're listed here. Now, the basic criteria I've used to try and pick these seats is that, first of all, it's obvious they should be a Leave voting seat, but there's 400 such seats, so that was an easy one. But secondly, as I showed on here, UKIP is strongest in areas where it's essentially become the three-way fight between Labour, Conservative and UKIP. So I've excluded seats where more than 10% of people voted for other parties. So these seats here, pretty much every single one of them, there's one or two exceptions I made that rule, but pretty much every single seat that I've highlighted here, at least 90% of people voted for these three parties. So it becomes a three-way fight. And that was the first criteria. The second criteria was that the Green Kipper Index, which, if you remember, is the difference between the UKIP vote and the Green vote share, should be at least 15%. Now, in practice, that meant that the UKIP vote should be at least 17%, i.e. 1 in 6 voters. And in most cases, the UKIP vote here in these seats are over 20%. So I'm setting quite a high threshold for the UKIP vote, at least 1 in 6, preferably 20%. And the third thing is they should be in at least third place in these seats. So when you run all those criteria through, you end up with 100 seats. Now, the split then into the 25 high priority seats I went through and I excluded every seat where either Labour or the Conservatives had more than 50% of the vote. In other words, they had an outright majority in the seat. Because if they've got an outright majority, UKIP is going to need quite a heavy swing in order to win those seats. But in these 25 seats, neither Labour or Conservative have an outright majority. And these bars just give you a visual impression of what the share of the vote is. Basically, it represents a scale from 0 to 50% in every case. So you can see in every case, so let's take Doncaster Central, for example, you see Labour have got almost 50% of the vote, but not quite. UKIP, I think, are second in this seat with just over 20%, and the Conservatives are just under 20%. You can see that all of these seats here in this 25, at least 60% of the voters voted Leave. Another factor that we've highlighted before that happened in the referendum, and one of the reasons why Leave won, was that the Leave seat also tended to see a big increase in turnout. So these figures here showed a change in turnout from 2015 to 2016. And you can see that in practically all seats here, the turnout went up by 10% or more from where it had been in 2015. So these are all seats where there's a high Leave vote, there's a high increase in turnout, and they're all majority working class. I've used the standard definitions of A, B, C1, C2, DE, and here we have percentages that would be classified C2, DE, which are the working class classification. And you can see every one of them, bar one, is over 50%. The exception here is Rochester and Stroud, which ordinarily I would not have put in here as a prospect. But you may remember that in 2014, UKIP actually won this seat in a by-election. So I felt because of that history, it should be kept in to this list. So this is the 25 that I picked up here based on those criteria. So they're effectively three-way fight, at least 90% voting for these three parties, and they're working class, Leave voting, big increase in turnout. And what's interesting, when you plot these seats on this map, you can see that certain areas start to form. We've got a bunch of seats up here in the northeast. We then got the Fenland area down here. We've got the Thames Gateway area extending out to Clacton and North Kent. We've got the Black Country here, and then Stoke just up here in the Potteries. And then we've got the Lancashire town, and then finally the coalfield of Nottinghamshire and South Yorkshire. And those, when you group them like this, you can see that practically every one of these areas is a Labour area. The only Conservative areas here are the Thames Gateways, where there's a lot of Conservative seats in play, and the Fenland area, but there's only one seat here, Boston and Skegness, that I would highlight as a priority. Other than that, these are medium priorities in the Fenland. So a lot of people have been saying, where is UKIP's future? Is it in the Conservative seats, or is it taking on Labour in the north? And I think my analysis here said that it should be taking on Labour in the Midland and the north. And if I had to pick the ultimate priority, I would actually go for the West Midlands. Stoke. All 3 seats here in Stoke are in play. I think UKIP is third in every single one of them, but the swing needed to win them is well within UKIP's reach. It's a straight 3-way fight here between Conservative, Labour and UKIP. And I think UKIP should absolutely be going all out for Stoke. But the other place they should be going is the Black Country of Wolverhampton, West Bromwich, Dudley, Walsall. Lots of seats in play here, and the West Midlands was the strongest lead by far. I mean, look here in the Black Country, 74% voting lead, nearly 2/3 working class. This, to me, is the biggest priority for UKIP. The South Yorkshire is a bit harder because Labour tend to be a bit stronger here, but Doncaster, Rotherham, Mansfield area definitely come into play. I probably would put the North East and the Lancashire towns a little bit on the back burner for now, try not to spread themselves too thin, which leaves us with the Thames Gateway. Now, this is interesting because it's got the largest number of seats, but they tend to be Conservative. And if the Conservative Party follow the strategy of implementing Brexit, respecting the Leave vote, I suspect they are going to dig into some of the UKIP votes here. So, if anything, I would expect the Conservative Party to strengthen their vote here, which may make these seats difficult for UKIP to win. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think the strategy of focusing on Labour seats in the North and Midlands and trying to take those seats is the right one to go. The last point I want to make here for UKIP is the other characteristic of these seats is that the swing needed to win these seats are all a maximum of 12% or so. And that has a little bit of a significance because Labour had already suffered a wipeout to another party, and that was in Scotland in 2015 to the Scottish Nationalists. Similar thing again in some respects. It was generally felt the working class Labour voters switched en masse from Labour to the SNP. And indeed, in 2010, Labour had, I think, 42 seats in Scotland, and they lost 41 of them to the SNP. And in those 41 seats that they lost, the average swing was 24%. Whereas you can see the swing here for UKIP to take these seats from mostly Labour, averaging 12%. So if UKIP can achieve something that's half as big as what the SNP achieved, then they could succeed in taking these seats. Now, they've got a bigger mountain to climb. For a start, the SNP have been a long stayer in the Scottish political scene, and more than that, they've been in government in Scotland since 2007. So the SNP had a track record that they could play on, but where the similarity is, of course, is that both the SNP and UKIP have had referendum to really put their messages forward and hopefully resonate with voters. So UKIP have an opportunity here. Obviously, the first thing they've got to sort out is their leadership. They're right shambles with their leadership election. So the very first thing, they've got to sort that out. And my reading of it is that Paul Nuttall should be the front runner. I think he is the front runner. Being from the north himself, he probably is the best of all the candidates to achieve this shift for UKIP. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. But these are my 25 targets they should be going after. And finally, let's now go on to the Lib Dems. I've already highlighted from a couple of charts ago that they need to be targeting Remain seats or mildly Leave seats. But in general, their vote at the moment is predominantly rural rather than, or areas where people have cars, rather than areas in city centres. So at first sight, that would seem to be the best strategy for the Lib Dems. Now, what I've done here for the Lib Dems is to work on the idea that the Lib Dems now have an opportunity to position themselves as the anti-Brexit party. And certainly Tim Farron, the leader of Lib Dems, has been talking on that way. Now, I've gone through and crunched the numbers, and I've identified these 181 seats here as being the best prospect for the Lib Dems if they want to appeal to the anti-Brexit demographic, so I'm basing it solely on anti-Brexit demographics, if that's their strategy, if that's their message, then there are demographics there that the Lib Dems can appeal to. Now, I'm not going to cover how I came up with that in this presentation. That's going to be in the next presentation, which I'll explain in a minute, and I'll explain the details as to how I identified these seats. But broadly speaking, you can see that these 181 seats, the vast majority of these are Conservative seats, which would make sense given what I said earlier. These seats are much more rural, higher car owning, but if you remember, there was quite a few Remain seats in the home counties. So that's why we don't see so many up in the north. They're predominantly in the south, in the home counties. The tendency to vote Remain, they tend to have a car. So that would be the best option at first sight for the Lib Dems to go. There's just one problem. They may be able to get a lot of votes, but they probably won't get a lot of seats. Based on my analysis, these are the 181 seats where I expect the Lib Dems to come at least second if they follow an anti-Brexit strategy. But you can see in only 11 of them would I expect them to come first and to win the seat. 4 of those are seats they already hold. 3 of the 7 seats they currently hold I would expect them to lose. These are shown by the light yellow ones, so Southport and Carshalton here in London and North Norfolk. Those seats I see at risk if they go on the pure anti-Brexit seat. I mean, they may be able to hold them. But then there are 7 seats here that I think an anti-Brexit strategy would deliver to the Lib Dems. 6 of them are Conservative, and they're highlighted by the dark blues here, and 1 Labour, which is Cambridge here. And here are the 7 seats that are listed in total. What's very interesting is that 3 of them here are in southwest London, one of which, Richmond Park, is currently going to have a by-election in December. So it will be the first test for the Lib Dems as an anti-Brexit party, and frankly they have to win that. If they don't win it, I don't think there's much future for the Lib Dems to exploit an anti-Brexit feeling as a way back to relevance in the British political scene. So this is absolutely critical. They basically have to go to it. As you see, majority of seats are Conservative, but there are some Labour seats. But Labour, there's a problem with this. You can see over here, I've listed out of each 181 seats, how many of them did they win in 2010? Overall in 2010, the Lib Dems had 54 seats. And you can see 27 of the 149 target seats the Lib Dems used to have. So that's one reason why I say they should go after these seats. Of the 25 Labour seats, 9 were Lib Dems. So, you know, there are prospects here. They could definitely go after it, except the problem. These seats tend to be city-centred. You can see a whole bunch of them here in London in the middle, and others here like Bristol, Oxford, Manchester, Leeds. These all tend to be city-centred, where the Greens could also be targeting these seats. And I think it's raised a serious question in my mind as to whether the Lib Dems can do this on their own. If they want to go after the Labour vote or Labour seat, they've got to have a think about the Green Party, because this is where the Greens tend to be strong as well. And it may be they need to have an alliance with the Green Party. The Green Party campaigns for Remain, and a significant proportion of their voters tend to be Remain voters. So there's common cause there to be made, and they need to give that serious thought. So there we are for the Lib Dems. Now, as I said, there's the Richmond Park by-election coming up. So that prompted me to do the analysis which led to what we see in this slide. But for more details on how I've done that, then please keep an eye out for part 4, which will be coming very soon. I hope to publish it in the next couple of days. But I felt it was worth having a separate presentation on this, on the forthcoming by-election. So this now means I'm doing a 5-part series, and after part 4 I'll cover my personal reflection. But thank you for listening to this, and I hope you've found this useful.